Okay, so there we go. So there's my little set of slides there, nonprofit marketing trends in the COVID-19 age. I dropped one link in the chat, and I can do it again if you need it from Salesforce. And the Salesforce one is on top trends impacting nonprofit marketers. So I'm just going to move forward with some research findings. And those are from the Content Marketing Institute. I have a link to the Content Marketing Institute piece that I pulled this from, as well as I've been a Content Marketing Institute member and subscriber to their newsletters for quite a while. And so I started out with a little bit about content strategy. And I'll just let you have a quick read of that for a few seconds. And this will make sense as we go ahead with the presentation. And so I want to obviously reference some past NetSquared Vancouver events, particularly Joel's, because of his presentation on the role of content. And that's sort of what helped get me kickstarted with this particular content or talk and presentation. And I have a link to Joel's piece as well. I'll share these maybe at the end. It might be better because it has a link directly to our website with information on Joel's talk. Now, what's really key before I move ahead to with these nonprofit marketing trends is really the role of data and basically marketing research and building of audiences and donor profiles. We're going to explore that when I move forward to talk about the role of artificial intelligence. And one thing on here is I've included a reference to another article, some research that I did about the 3 types of AI. And you'll see there I've got a couple of points on those slides for 3 important business needs. And one of the things that's really important to remember about those 3 important business needs also is that companies need to look at AI through the lens of the capability, not the technology. And the business needs are automating business processes, gaining insight through data analysis, and engaging with customers and employees. And this customer and employee engagement piece is really key for nonprofits and really for anyone. Later on, I'm going to talk a little bit about rebuilding donor trust within organizations. And you'll note down here that I've said that there's little research done on how artificial intelligence can be used in nonprofits. So that's one of the keys sort of when we talk about the COVID-19 age in marketing and with nonprofits is the role of AI. And one of the things that's really key with AI is that it helps people, automate routine administrative activities. And that's its basic and least expensive thing for nonprofits who might be cash strapped. And what's really key here is that tasks can be done without human intervention, reducing IT spending and the need for errors caused by humans through fatigue, just through mistakes. AI allows organizations to process large amounts of data in less time than a human being could do it, with less computation, again, leading to reduction in error. And I think that's really critical in marketing, especially for donor outreach when you're trying to reach out to not only new clients, but also existing ones. And so I've noted here about could the role of AI lead to personalization 2.0? AI is a trend because AI is really a trend now. And I'll just back up just for 1 second because I noted about how the AI market is projected to reach 70 billion by 2020. So we see it all over the place, and maybe it gets a bit of a stigma if you think about popular culture in Hollywood. If you've ever watched a movie like The Terminator, which I actually watched when formulating this presentation, about a Terminator who comes through time and the role of AI in sort of things like that. So I just want to move forward back to personalization. And what's really key there with the personalization piece is creating personalized marketing campaigns. And so not only that, but the role that creating a personalized marketing campaign can have an effect on reaching new donors, right? Especially because we know that nonprofits often, and I get emails from them in places I've donated, what they do is they send out a lot of generic emails to people without the right kind of targeted messaging. And so one of the other things that comes up with personalization as well, I haven't included it here, is the role of a chatbot. And I haven't looked at too many nonprofit websites recently, but I know a lot of business-based websites use chatbots. And what's really important there for a nonprofit is that it can help direct people to donation pages, upcoming events, or scheduling of appointments, right? And it also can facilitate introductions to the organization and to people within the organization. So that's why I'm really, really passionate about the whole chatbot piece, even though I sometimes find them personally very annoying. They seem like an ad, but with more research, I really see the value of something like that. And I'll just back out for 1 second. I've got another thing I want to drop in here from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and it's a presentation here as well. So I'll just drop that in, and I'll be moving on back there to this slide about personalization. So we're talking a lot about, sort of targeted campaigns. But what's really important to remember too, with these campaigns is the role that AI can have not only in, organizing the data, but then helping you put together campaigns where you target your specific donors, if you're reaching out to new donors, things of that nature. One of the things that's really important too with the personalization piece is using your data and recognizing repeat donors. Donors' loyalty towards their cause is really, really important, as you know. And I've mentioned this already. You're sending out links or information about your organization to people or potential people without any personalization. And if you haven't done research on, with your data on your target market, they're probably going to ignore it or delete it, or you'll get a very small rate of return on a generic email like that. So I've put in another piece from the Salesforce report, and again, you can see how I built from recapping on AI to personalization, and then as a result of personalization, what's really key is how the constituent experience is really important. That's really what I'm driving at here. And you're talking a lot about that emotional connection with people that come to your organization. Just have to pause there and just take a quick drink. And so you see the two things from the Salesforce report, and you see how important that is when it's 75% is a key competitive differentiator. That's really, really important. I don't have a lot of contact with a lot of local nonprofits at this point. I'd be interested in hearing more from them about what they do with their donors and how they do their outreach. So here again is another piece on personalization that I think is really, really important, is the role of digital culture and strategy. And we've already talked a little bit about the customer experience piece. And if I can just elaborate a little more on the digital strategy piece, is just the importance of, building marketing strategy and digital strategy that reflects the needs of the people that you serve, both as donors and as employees. And that's why I mentioned the role of AI in being able to use that data to inform also about your customers and their experience, but also how to build a strategy. And again, I can't emphasize enough when I did the research and I looked at lots of different reports and I looked at lots of different information, how important the donor trust piece is. And so I've mentioned it here about how strategy needs to be crafted. And we've talked already about the emotional piece, the connection, that it's meaningful, and it's been a marketing trend for quite a while with digital strategy. And we see some of the primary ways: their website, social media, blogging, email, and video. So those are really in any marketer's toolkit. And it's funny to mention websites. I don't know if people think those are an afterthought anymore, but that was really the first way to get your message out there about your organization online, and all the other technologies have followed since. So some more on digital strategy and what it does in terms of leading to better customer experience, right? And I've mentioned it again here as the third bullet point, and it's really simple, I think, to do that outreach, but also look at your potential donor and really understand what they want from the organization, why they donate. And of course, I've mentioned the donor trust piece there, as well as, basically getting potential donors to your cause. And so that really wraps up all the pieces that I have for you. I've left a slide here about who I am. There's my photo. There's my who am I. I'm a Net2Van volunteer. There's my company website. I can drop a phone number and a email in the chat. Okay. Are there any questions?
Cool. Thank you so much, Ben, for taking us through a real lightning overview of sort of where you see some of the emerging trends happening around personalization, AI. Yeah, I've been throwing a couple resources into the chat as well.
They're all big.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear from other people here. If you throw a question into the chat, I will put you on mic, and you'll be on the spot. So if you're emotionally ready for that, that's an option for you. Otherwise, of course, I can always read out your questions as well. Yeah, so why don't I start in with this, Ben? From my perspective, I think automation is always this scary place, because what happens is you can start the machine and then suddenly it starts like running out of control. Maybe not Terminator style, but suddenly you start up something where you get, you say like, oh, okay, great, every new donor who comes in gets this message, and then you kind of set it and forget it, and it's out of date. So what are some of the best practices for just making sure that your automation doesn't run out of control?
Right. Yeah, I think there's that stigma of AI, and I mentioned the Terminator thing, but when I read a lot of stuff on AI, I thought about it too. It's like, well, it's sort of like machines that learn and machines that take over, and they do all these things, right? But when you look at a lot of the research and the stuff that I read about AI, especially for a nonprofit, to be able to get that data and information, that's really key for them, and to be able to customize it and to be able to market based on that ability to customize, to me, is what really struck me. And I see it as a marketer. I see the messages that I get, and I have a different lens to look at them. One as a consumer, and then also as a, someone who does this kind of work.
Cool. So I've got a question here coming from Charlie about your favorite CRM for nonprofits right now. And Ben, I know you've done some CRM work here, but I'm going to open this up to others in the chat as well.
Right.
I'd love to hear from others what kind of CRM they're using here. And I think, Charlie, while we start tackling this, if you can give a sense of like the kind of problem set or solution you're trying to hear from, I think that's useful, because obviously every CRM has just got different flavors and things that specializes at. So Jason, I'm going to put you on going to invite you in. If you'd love to sort of talk maybe a little about your experience with your CRM, love to hear that. I can't do that.
Question.
So yeah, so Jason, if you're curious, you can always try and tell us a little bit more about that. Lauren, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Zoho? It's not a system I've ever used. I'd love to hear more about that.
Okay, so I've just started using Zoho CRM. So this is pretty recent with one of my contracts. Right. We're using it to manage a child sponsorship program. So to have a database of all the sponsors and a database of all the children. And one of the things that it's really useful for is outside of marketing emails, there are emails that need to make it to the sponsors. So not emails asking sponsors, for donations or things like that would fall into the marketing category, but emails specific about, this is how you send a letter to your sponsor child, or we've updated our privacy terms. So we found Zoho CRM is really good for managing that because it doesn't it gets sent as a normal email and it doesn't risk being landing in a junk or spam. The other features we're still kind of playing around with. It seems to have good features for custom fields, and based on the research that I did initially, it's kind of the most affordable option if you just need very simple things from a CRM. And then I did kind of look into HubSpot. It's definitely more robust. It has a much prettier platform, but it also has a much bigger price tag. So, but I know it's a popular one as well.
Really interesting. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. I've haven't really played with Zoho, but I've definitely played with HubSpot in my day job at TechSoup. Like all the CRMs, I find they have very different needs. So if you want to run giant email marketing campaigns, create lots of landing pages, custom landing pages, forms, it's fabulous at that. If you wanted to do CRM from say a case management step, if you were trying to say someone applied for a grant and then they move through the different steps, or you want to run sort of something like that,
right?
It's more limited around solving those kinds of solutions. So it's always just a matter of what you want to do. I actually got a demo recently, actually was it yesterday from Kila.org, which is a company based here in Vancouver, which does sort of an all-in-one CRM for nonprofits. And it comes in more on the basic side. It's not a Salesforce, but it sort of meets all the nonprofit needs. And I thought what was really interesting around that from the AI standpoint, is it runs some basic machine learning on that and starts just giving on everyone's profile page, here's 3 things you could do with this particular person, mostly from a fundraising standpoint. So it would say oh, we know this person always gives in July every year, and they always respond by email, not to phone calls. And because, as you put that information into your CRM, it can basically start giving you clues. If you're a really great fundraiser, you're not going to need this. But if you're just someone who is doing fundraising off the side of your desk amongst the many other responsibilities you have as a nonprofit, I thought it was a super interesting model to basically solve the question of what do I do next?
Interesting.
Anyone else here got some CRM pain to share? Because I'm sure anyone who's ever touched a CRM has run into pain. Yeah. Feel free to just throw something into the chat. And if you're brave, I'll put you on mic. So the other thing I've found to be really interesting is sort of this idea of turning sort of chatbots into ways of filling out forms. We all know that if you throw a form at someone, they bounce off it. They're like, information, data, terrifying, look at all that. And so people have taken this progressive model where basically you say oh, just put your name in here. And then it's oh yeah, that's great. Now I have another question. So you sort of take form filling into almost a conversational model. And of course, it also works way better on a phone because now you just have one big fancy field as opposed to 20 squeezed into a page. So I think that's been another interesting idea. Stephanie, so yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about this? About Zoho and its possible AI. I actually don't know anything about that. If you got other information around that, love to hear more from you. And if you want, I'll even give you the power to come on as a presenter. Kapow. So I've got, one other thing I want to, make sure I hear from people as we come in towards the end of this, which is let's talk about the future. So we are just wrapping up our 2020 programming, and normally we would post a whole series of events for 2021, but we've all been in this weird space for the last couple of months, and so we're just trying to figure out, do we need to adjust some of our programming needs as we start planning these events for the coming year? So as you saw, we've got our first event scheduled in for January, but after that, it's all mysteries. So I'd love for you to drop into the chat any kind of topic that you're interested in learning more about. And if you know a presenter who might even be good for that, all the better, of course.
That's a good question. I'm just looking at it. Thanks, Lauren. A small audience donor base, how targeted do you want to get before it becomes tedious and efficient to manage?
And Ben, if you just want to repeat out the question before you go in, that'd be great.
I can.
Thank you.
There's a question here for me in the chat, and particularly if you have a small business audience donor base, how targeted do you want to get before it becomes tedious and inefficient to manage? That's a good question, and that applies to anything in marketing when you're looking at target markets, even before you involve AI. And I think before you understand, or before you decide how targeted you want to get, you have to know who and what you're targeting. And if the AI and the software can help you do that, great. I'm not sure of which tool does that, but I know from a marketing perspective, I hope you understand your target market before you decide how targeted to become, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and from my experience has always been on the nonprofit side.
Mm-hmm.
Further niching is always good. Being more targeted is always good. You can certainly see that always in like the open rates, the unsubscribe rates. But I always have to balance that against the reality of how many content niches can I actually support with my time and my capacity. And so I would say often I've been, frankly, been led more by my capacity questions rather than what would be the very best thing for my clients and end users and members. They would like more niching. They would like things more specific to their passions and interests. They've given me all kinds of clues about what they are. If only I could truly meet their needs.
Well, that's the key, and I think I hit on that several times in the presentation and in my research too, Eli. Was how important it is to rebuild donor trust, or at least establish it, right? And without any kind of proper marketing strategy, or I talked about digital strategy and culture, you're not even probably going to get that information if you don't know your target audience and who and what you're targeting, and having access to that information even prior to AI, right? That's, like I said, when I saw that thing about generic messaging, I thought, oh, that's a killer, because you're just sending out messages to people, sort of grasping, right? And it brings back, at least the way I felt when I shared that anecdote about Salesforce, and I signed up for that thing and they reached out to me, and it was like, well, guys, I'm just using it for presentation. I'm not buying the product. So you're kind of guessing through lead generation somebody that you might want to call to target, whether having the actual information and the right information to target somebody that you know is going to buy right away. That's sort of the way I see it.
Yeah, no, that sounds super reasonable. So I think we're coming up towards, the end for this month. Ben, do you have any final things you want to drop, pearls of wisdom?
Not so much pearls of wisdom. Just thank you for the opportunity. I put it on. I'll put my website in here and my contact info and email address, and I think that's about it.
Well, and I would be remiss to say that you should also, of course, be following us on Twitter. I'll drop that link in there too. Ben has been leading that for, like the last 6 months and has really turned it from something which I ignored into something which is actually interesting and engaging. And I would recommend you tagging us with your interesting posts because Ben would be happy to help make sure it gets across the rest of our community.
Correct.
Lovely. Well then, again, let me just take us into our final little slides. One moment. Share. So as I said, we have another event coming up on January 13th. This is going to be really focused on lead generation and growth for your website. So basically, how do you turn your website into something that's actually going to drive new members and new donors? And so that'll be the focus. Then by the time we're into January, we'll have a whole new series of upcoming events. And we look forward to you joining us there as well. Otherwise, thank you so much to Ben for leading us today as a presenter, and to Lauren, who's going to document it and make us all sound good. So thank you so much to everyone, and we will see you all in the new year. We're going to get there. It's going to be amazing, I promise. And click stop recording.